Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Pankhuri, your host, and this is After the Jump. I am here to talk about the 10-day Vipassana course that I did from December 2nd to December 13th. You asked for it. So I'm serving it to you right on a platter. Let's dive right in. So I first heard about Vipassana last year from an ex-colleague. And I remember after he came back, all he mentioned was that he went for this course in a center located in Igatpuri, which is basically a town in Maharashtra, the state of Maharashtra, India. And I don't exactly remember the specifics of that conversation, but after he mentioned that the course requires you to observe complete silence for 10 days, I remember telling him that I don't think I would ever be able to do something like that because at the time it just sounded a bit much. And that was that. That was the end of that conversation. Cut to this year. I was supposed to leave Mumbai on November 24th, which is precisely what I did. But before that, I knew because I wanted to relocate, I knew that I would be in this liminal state where I would have to come down to my hometown, which is where I'm right now. And it just sort of clicked me. It just sort of occurred to me that I could do the Vipassana course. I don't know where did it pop up in my head, like out of nowhere, out of the blue, but it did. And I mulled over it for a few days, decided that I wanted to do it, and just put down an application on the official website. And initially, I had applied for this center in a different town altogether. Um, Nalanda, it's a small town in the state of Bihar in India. But once my application was accepted, I received a call from the organizers and they said that they wanted to transfer me to the center in Bodh Gaya. And I agreed. And I think that was a very good thing that happened because Bodh Gaya is also that place where Lord Buddha attained enlightenment. And, the entire place has a very beautiful magical vibe because it also has this World Heritage site called the Mahabodhi Temple. And the Mahabodhi Temple has the Bodhi tree. It is the same tree under which Lord Buddha attained enlightenment. And right after my Vipassana course ended, I did happen to visit the Mahabodhi temple and it was amazing. Like the entire thing made so much sense. It was quite good. So I just feel like, it was such a divine intervention that, I was transferred to the center at Bodh Gaya because I got to actually experience Bodh Gaya in general. And Bodh Gaya also has some really good eateries. So did manage to explore a couple of those as well. But yeah, so that's precisely what happened. I applied, I put down my application, got accepted, and my course began on 2nd December and lasted until the 13th of December. 13th of December is when I walked out of the center. Now, I am not someone who's religious at all. I am someone who does believe that there's a higher power. I do pray, but I'm not necessarily praying to a specific God. So I am not someone who would make an attempt, like, who would, with some intention, ensure that, they visit a temple. Like, I'm not a person like that. But I was completely enamored by the Mahabodhi temple and especially the Bodhi tree under which Lord Buddha attained enlightenment. And the fact that I got to visit the Bodhi tree and the temple right after my Vipassana course ended, all of that just sort of made such perfect sense. Now, coming back to what the course actually looks like, what all does it entail, what all can you expect, and what was my personal experience, I want to begin by saying that I swear I did not have any idea about Vipassana in general. Like, as I mentioned, all I recalled as I was putting down my application was that my colleague back then had told me that it is a course where you have to observe absolute silence for 10 days. I did not even know that it's a course where they teach you a specific kind of meditation, which is what it turned out to be. And I'll get down to the details soon. But I had zero clue about anything. I did not know what to expect. And somehow I did not even bother looking up what Vipassana actually was. It never occurred to me that I should sort of ask people about it. So all of those things did not happen. I didn't even look up the term Vipassana. I just walked in knowing that I would definitely have to surrender my mobile phone and, I would not have the liberty or the leisure to be able to contact other people. I knew that I wouldn't be allowed to talk to other people and I would have to observe complete silence, but that's about it. That's all I knew. And I thought, all right, these things are pretty doable. Like observing silence and not talking to people and, not using your phone. All of these things are pretty easy because I love being by myself. At the time, I thought, all right, this is cakewalk. It's chill. So that's what happened. I walked in without knowing what to expect. And I think that was great like I think that just worked out again perfectly well for me. So day zero started with, me submitting my phone, my valuables, things like that. We got to have some dinner at around 6:30, and then we were asked to, I think around 6:37, after a short introduction, we were taken to a meditation hall and we were, instructed to meditate for, I think, an hour. So that was day zero. And sharp at 8 is when the noble silence, that's what they call it. It's called noble silence. The practice of observing absolute silence began at 8 p.m. So before that, even if you were within the premises, you could talk to other people. So yeah, that's what happened at day zero. And meditating for an hour was not challenging. Obviously, like again, even on day zero, we did not really have an idea. I did not have an idea as to what all would the entire course entail. So that's what happened at day zero. Now, they have segregated compounds for both men and women. So there are residential quarters and there are separate dining halls for both men. And the first day was December 3rd for me, and which is when the clock on the 10-day course started ticking. Now, this is what the schedule was for all of the 10 days starting December 3rd. So there's a bell that goes off, like a very traditional bell at 4 a.m. in the morning. That's your signal, that's your cue to wake up. Everybody has to wake up. And there are servers who are basically old students. They are sort of surveilling the premises, the quarters, and they keep ringing the bells until you're out of your bed, because sharp at 4:30 a.m., you are required to be present inside the meditation hall for a group meditation that lasts for 2 hours. So basically, it starts at 4:30, ends at 6:30. Starting 6:30, you have your breakfast, goes on until 7:15, and then between 7:15 to 8 o'clock, you can take a break, you can go rest. 8 o'clock, again, you are required to come down to the meditation hall for meditation. Since all of the meditations that happened throughout the day, they were guided meditations. Okay, just rehashing a little bit. I just want to mention that Vipassana was actually introduced by S.N. Goenka. He was a person who was born to an Indian business family in Burma, but then he migrated to India. He came down to India and he set up all of these Vipassana centers to begin with. And then obviously these centers spread all across the world. So these centers are literally everywhere now. You can sign up for a course from wherever it is that you are in the world. So yeah, all of the meditations were guided essentially in his voice over speakers. And there would be two teachers who would be present in the hall, and they're the ones who are sort of overseeing the entire practice, but at the same time, they are also the ones who are sort of directing. So there would be times when, certain clusters of people would be called down and they would ask you questions just to ensure that, you're getting the technique, you're just sort of getting whatever is being taught. And there would also be questions and answers at different sets of timings. Okay, so now coming back to the schedule, there's a bell that goes off at 4 a.m. in the morning, which is when you're required to get up, freshen up. By 4:30 a.m., you are required to reach the meditation hall, which is where the group meditation happens, which is where all of the meditations happen. And first meditation starting at 4:30 a.m. goes on until 6:30 a.m. The teachers are obviously present, most of the times. You're meditating for 12 hours a day. 6:30 a.m., you have breakfast, like I said, and, it goes on until 7:15 to 8 a.m. You can rest. 8 o'clock to 9, again, you have meditation. Then 9 to 11, again, you have a group meditation. All of these are in continuity. All right. But you can take breaks in between. You can go out and, in the open areas, you can like take a walk, you can stretch yourself out. But like, everybody would always come back because you have to relentlessly be at it. And then this goes on until, like I said, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. 11 a.m. is when you break for lunch. The lunch ends at 11:45, and then until 1, you can take a rest. Most people also showered during that segment because that's when the hot water would run between 11 to 1. Then at 1 o'clock, you would again have to come down for a meditation at the meditation hall. And then you would have a meditation from 1 to 2:30, another meditation from 2:30 to 3:30, and then another meditation from 3:30 to 5. All of these in continuity. Like I said, you can obviously take breaks in between, but you always come back. And then at 5, you have your tea. You break for tea. It's also light dinner for the newcomers, the new students, but it's tea for the old students, people who have come back again for the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth time. So for old students, they would only serve certain beverages. So, for example, black tea or lemon water or herbal water. You would have all of these beverages, but you would also get a snack, a very light snack of puffed rice. And that's it. That's all you had for your dinner. The dinner would go on from 5 to 5:30, and then from 5:30 to 6 you could take some rest in your residential quarters. So essentially you're getting like 3 rest breaks in between. And then at 6 you are again required to come down to the meditation hall for a meditation which would go on from 6 to 7. 7 to 8:30 is when you would have the discourse. The discourse would be led by SN Goenka ji. So you're essentially watching him on a screen and he is essentially giving a discourse. He's explaining things and he's talking about, Lord Buddha's journey. It was actually Lord Buddha who discovered the art and the technique of Vipassana meditation. And it was through this technique he attained enlightenment. And he started teaching the technique to his disciples and to everybody who sort of wanted to learn. And that's how Vipassana, as a meditation art, as a meditation technique, was born. And it was obviously, people who people who were able to preserve the authenticity of this technique, they were able to carry it forward and it was passed down. And that's how, it was also passed down to SN Goenka ji by one of his teachers. And SN Goenka was then authorized to teach the art of Vipassana meditation to others. And that's how these Vipassana centers were born. So 7 to 8:30, like I said, we would have the discourse. This was genuinely my favorite part of the entire day. SN Goenka was a very witty man and he had such presence, and you could literally feel that presence, the enormous presence that he had through the screen. So he would really captivate you. It was a wonderful experience to just, be a part of that discourse for 1.5 hours. And honestly, it was also very entertaining. He would actually make people laugh. Yeah, that's essentially, that's how the discourse would essentially happen. And from 8:30 to 9, you would again have to sit for a meditation. That would be the closing meditation. And from 9 to 9:30, if you had question answers, you could stay back in the hall, and both of the teachers, they're literally there to sort of answer your questions. That was one question answer session, and the other one would happen almost every day from 11:30 to 12:30 in the afternoon. So those were the two slots that you would sort of get to, clarify your doubts and seek answers to your questions. So that's how the schedule would look like. Now, coming back to the art of Vipassana meditation and how did it actually look like? So, as I mentioned, this technique was discovered essentially by Lord Buddha after he relinquished all of the worldly pleasures. I mean, this is how he attained enlightenment. And it is that same non-sectarian scientific technique which was propagated by Lord Buddha and then passed down. Essentially, what this involves is, like I said, day 0 was pretty simple. It was simply, observing your breath. All you had to do was observe your breath for, I think, 1.5 hours. Days 1 to 3 were the days when you were obviously guided through every group meditation practice, where you were asked and instructed to observe your breath. So, for example, day 1 was when you were observing your breath, simply observing your breath, the passage of your breath in and out of your nostrils. Day 2 and 3, you had to observe the feeling you had on the area below your nostrils and above your upper lips. So, essentially, you had to feel the sensations. Now, essentially, what happens is when you're trying to do this, you're trying to teach your mind to develop that level of concentration that you are only focusing on these specific areas. So you're literally focusing on your nostrils and then the area between your nostrils and your upper lip. And this sharpens your brain because you are forcing your brain to focus on something so specific. And then what happens is you start to feel certain sensations on these areas. Now, what happens is the sharper your mind gets and the more you're able to concentrate, the more you're tapping into your subconscious mind, unconscious, subconscious mind. 4th day is the Vipassana day. It's the day that the art of Vipassana meditation is actually taught. So essentially, now the first 3 days were actually your training days where you were taught to bring your mind down from a level of experiencing a much grosser reality to a much subtler reality, right? So when I say gross reality, what I mean is that our minds are monkey minds, right? Where like our minds are always thinking about the past, the present, the future, like all things at once. It's like you never really know with your minds, right? Sometimes our thoughts don't even have like logical sequence to them, logical meanings to them, right? So our minds are essentially monkey minds. And that means that our minds are actually experiencing grosser realities, not subtler realities. But when you force your minds to concentrate on something so specific and something so small, such as the area on your nostrils, the surface area on your nostrils, or the surface area between your nostrils and your upper lip, you are essentially training your mind to go down from a level of a grosser reality to a much subtler reality. And for those 3 days, this is how you train your brain. So, the fourth day, your brain is trained enough to actually learn the art of Vipassana meditation, wherein you're taught to draw your attention down to different parts of your body. And essentially, you start feeling flow of energy, flow of these wavelets, flow of these vibrations, flow of these sensations, which is exactly the subtlest and the realist reality of our bodies, of our lives. Now, I also want to mention that the term Vipassana actually means seeing things as they are. And that's essentially why the technique teaches you what it teaches you. You are seeing things as they are. You're seeing the things of your body, of your life as they are. So, what happens is, as you're observing these sensations, these wavelets, flow of these vibrations, you are essentially also tapping into your subconscious, unconscious mind. So, anything and everything that is buried deep in your subconscious or your unconscious mind also comes to the surface. But the trick here is that they keep teaching you that you are only required to fully pay attention to what's happening on your body. And the more you're able to do this, the more you prevent your brain from wandering off, the sharper your brain gets. And through these sensations, you're actually engaging in the art of somatic healing. So not only are you tapping into your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind, but at the same time, through experiencing these sensations and these vibrations and these wavelets, which are actually biochemical reactions which keep happening on our bodies, some things that we're not even aware of. This is very scientific. You're actually, like I said, you're purifying yourself somatically. So it literally works both ways, and it was wonderful. Like, you learn more about this because each day you have these discourses as well towards the end of the day, like I mentioned, from 7 to 8:30. Also integrating, like, you understand more about this, but in a nutshell, that is essentially what happens. That you're also somatically healing yourself by experiencing these sensations and at the same time tapping into your subconscious and your unconscious mind. So the idea is that you are neither required to suppress nor required to express. You only observe. That is the principle. And that's precisely what you're doing through Vipassana. The more you are able to narrow your mind down, the more you're able to concentrate and bring all of your focus and attention, the more you're allowing yourself to experience the subtlest, literally the subtlest reality of your body, of your life. And honestly, it was amazing. It was amazing how so many things came up to the surface. But at the same time, while things were coming up to the surface, you also had to keep observing sensations. So even if an emotion came up for you, you had to keep observing sensations. You had to remind yourself in that moment to be present and not let your mind wander off, but feel the sensations as you were probably experiencing those emotions. So, for example, if you ended up crying, a lot of bottled up emotions from the past were coming up to the surface. It's not that you can't cry, you have to cry. You should cry, but at the same time, you have to continue to observe sensations. And let's say for some reason you're not able to experience the sensations in that moment because you're crying, you're supposed to experience the sensation of the tears on your face. So it's literally as if not only are you excavating unpurified thoughts, traumas and grief and anything and everything that was repressed and suppressed from your brain, from your mind, But at the same time, you're also excavating any and every unprocessed emotion from your body. I'm sure you guys are aware, just as an example, that our lungs, for instance, they store grief, right? And which is why we do a lot of breath work. Like you are told by so many people, I'm pretty sure you would have heard of this, that you should do breath work because that's how you're like processing grief which is stored in your lungs. So that's literally somatic healing, one kind of somatic healing. This is literally an all body somatic healing wherein you are excavating or suppressed all sorts of suppressed emotions, sorts of repressed emotions from every part of your body. So you're literally purifying your brains and your bodies. That's what made it so amazing. Now, 10th day is Metta Day. 10th day is also when you get to break your noble silence. So after the 9 a.m. meditation, you can break your noble silence. And that's also when you get your phones back. So essentially, you can talk to whosoever you want, but you cannot exit the compound. And after your lunch and everything else, there are a couple of meditations wherein you're taught how to practice metta. Essentially, what they're telling you, what they're teaching you on Metta Day is that when you're meditating and when you are practicing experiencing sensations and wavelets and energy throughout your body, you are also supposed to do it with a feeling of love and compassion in your heart for everybody in this universe. So essentially, what you are doing is that you're using the same meditation technique whilst feeling all of the sensations and the vibrations and the wavelets on the surface area of different parts of your body to practice love and compassion for everybody in the entire universe. And that's the 10th day. The 11th day is the closing day where you finish off the day, with that early morning meditation starting at 4:30, which lasts up till 6:30 a.m. And then you have a closing discourse by S.N. Goenka. And yeah, that's how you close the last day, the 11th day. Now, coming back to my personal experience of the entire course. So, first things first, for me, I think the biggest challenge was to be able to sit for that long because every day you're essentially meditating for 12 hours, right? So for 10 days, you have meditated for 120 hours. So being able to sit for that long was the greatest challenge that I ever experienced. That's because I was diagnosed with slip disc herniation last year, although it really doesn't affect me anymore, but it's very essential for me that I work out every day. And you're not really allowed to do anything. You can definitely walk outside in the open areas, like right outside your residential quarters or, the meditation hall. But other than that, you cannot really do anything. You can do your stretches, outside in the open areas, but that's about it. You're not really allowed to work out, exercise, do yoga, all of that jazz. That's not permitted. So, but yeah, that was the single most challenge and I think the greatest challenge that I faced. The other thing, which was like a minor discomfort, I wouldn't call it a discomfort, but just, I had to be very careful with this specific thing. Essentially, you cannot mix any other spiritual modality with the meditation technique. I'm a Reiki healer. I'm a Reiki practitioner, a Reiki healer, level 2. And with Reiki healer, specifically, what happens is that if we are sitting and if we're just idle, right? If we are sitting, standing, and not really doing anything, Reiki energy starts oozing out of our hands. So, for example, if I'm just sitting here and like not really doing anything, my hands are oozing Reiki energy. And essentially that was slight challenge, and because I would have to be very careful and very conscious that I do not mix up Reiki energies with the sensations that I was feeling on my body. So I would make sure that I would rub my palms off, or I would ensure that I would just keep my palms facing down. Like I would never keep my palms in a receiving mode, which is what you generally do when you're meditating. Like that's how I've always meditated. That's how other meditators do it as well. But yeah, that is essentially one slight discomfort that I had, but it was really minor. Like I just had to be careful. I wouldn't even call it a discomfort. Other than that, being quiet, not being able to talk to people, not having my phone with me, I don't think all of those things were challenges in that sense. Like I love being by myself. So it was not something that I would call a challenge. However, I do want to mention that, on the 6th day, towards the end of 6th day is when I started feeling like I had been on one end of the spectrum for far too long by being quiet. And I was feeling like I had dulled my brain down too much. And I wanted to walk to the other end of the spectrum to be able to bring about a balance. I'm a person who's all about balance. So I don't like doing one thing, the specific kind of thing too much without having to do something else. So for example, because I had been so quiet for the last, the past 6 days. On the sixth day, I started feeling like I really wanted to get it out of my system. Like I wanted to dance. I'm actually a dancer as well. I really enjoy dancing and I really wanted to just I felt like I had pent up energies and I wanted to get those energies out. So that was a little frustrating, but I calmed myself down. I comforted myself and, I just told myself that we barely have like 4 more days. So yeah, closer to the goal. And that's how the sixth day went. But on the seventh day is when I started feeling like I wanted to talk to someone. It was slightly annoying for me. I definitely got agitated, feeling like I had been quiet for way too long and it would be nice to talk to someone. But again, I comforted myself. And I also, on the very same day, started feeling like, man, it would be nice to just get it over with. But I was also very conscious of the fact that I didn't want to do disservice to myself. I had committed to myself and I wanted to follow through the commitment. So, as much as I was thrilled to realize that we were only 2 days away from breaking our noble silence and from having our phones back, I was also very conscious that I wanted to do this the proper way. So I was still very disciplined. I was definitely in those two headspaces. And like as each day, passed after the 7th day, like it was just like, it was so great. Every day would feel like a challenge, but each day also felt like by the close to the end of the day, I would also feel calmer and calmer. I would also feel like I had eased into it a little more. But it was almost like a cycle. But I remember specifically on the ninth day, I felt like the world had slowed down quite a bit. And I didn't feel like I was away from the 10th day or that I needed the entire course to end. I was finally feeling like I was at ease. So that was amazing, but I still hadn't realized the full potential of the benefits that the course was going to bring to me. Now, coming back to how I felt emotionally and the things that surfaced for me, like exactly in terms of, my heart and my head, what I felt a lot of repressed emotions that came up for me in respect of certain friendships that I let go of this year completely and fully. I had decided to sort of completely let go of these friendships. And I realized that I was still processing some of the hurt and the grief that I had felt. And I feel like during, the course is when I came into full acceptance with the fact that I was done with those friendships. And yeah, I sort of had this feeling of just feeling balanced and very accepting of everything without feeling any resentments or hurt or grief. So that was amazing. That was great. I also received a couple of downloads, a couple of insights about my own work, about how I wanted to progress, considering I quit my job, my corporate law firm job on 31st of July. And I have pivoted and I have been trying to create this new life for myself. So in terms of my liminal phase that I'm in right now, and also in terms of the work that I'm trying to do, I received a couple of insights and downloads, and I felt the surge of positivity, which was again wonderful. Another thing that happened, which was quite interesting, but also uncanny to me, was I was seeing my past life in the sense that the life that had gone by. You know what I mean? So memories from years ago, years and years ago, were coming up for me. And I slightly felt disarmed because I was not expecting those things to come up. My brain also got slightly unnerved and confused because I couldn't make sense of what they meant for me. So I did, have this discussion with the teacher in one of the question answer slots. And she just told me that, Lord Buddha also did see his past lives. Not that he saw things from the past in his current life, but he actually saw all of his past lives. So it was just sort of your brain's way of unearthing a lot of things, things, memories, people, places that it has known. So that gave me some comfort. And I did not try to derive any other meaning out of it. That is how I felt while I was at the center. But as I walked out, there is one word that I've been using quite a lot, and this is how I've been explaining my experience to other people, is that I walked out and I felt like my mind was purified. And that's not a word that you use, sort of. Like I've never heard someone say that their minds are purified. And that's how I felt. I felt like all the dust and the soot from my brain or, just from my insides in general had come out. And I just felt so much more sovereign and like in control of myself. In fact, very frankly speaking, my father told me that he felt like I had more gravity, more influence. So that was wonderful. I definitely feel calmer now. I definitely feel like I'm not reacting or even responding for that matter. I'm observing more. I've not felt like I need to talk as much. And yeah, it's just, I really feel like my mind has become equanimous. That's the word that they constantly used at the center, that you are trying to attain equanimity in your mind, which essentially means that you're trying to make your mind more balanced. So that's definitely been wonderful. I will not lie and sugarcoat that, it was an easy course. It was definitely very difficult. It is so taxing, right? Because it demands a lot out of you. You have to wake up at 4 in the morning and the entire schedule runs up until 9:30 p.m. And you have to eat what you have to eat. You cannot make demands. You cannot talk to yourself, to other people. You don't have access to the outside world. You don't get to do things your own way. There's a defined schedule. You have to survive within that. So all of those things, I feel like, put you through a test where you have to show to yourself that you are determined, that you have that mental strength and that capability to commit to yourself, and to show that you have committed yourself. It's almost as if you are proving yourself to yourself. There is nothing that you have to prove to anybody, because you are at liberty to walk out of the course whenever you want. Some people do that because it is that challenging. But, once you just make up your mind that no matter what happens, I am going to be here and I am going to do the entire course, it is literally champagne gold light at the end of that tunnel. You know what I mean? So I would definitely suggest that everybody do it once. The centers are literally all across the world. You can sign up from wherever you are. And you know what? The course is free. You can make a donation at the end of the course if you want. So many people come back to do it over and over again. There were so many people that I met who had already done it for 4 or 5 times. And there's a reason. It does wonders to you. I had thought sometime in the middle of the course that I don't think I would be able to do this ever again. But once I was done, literally on the 10th day, I thought I am definitely doing this again. I'm not saying I'm going to do it like literally in the next 6 months or something, but I'm definitely doing it sometime in the future. So yeah, that brings me to the end of this video. Let me know if you guys would like me to answer any more questions. If you have any more questions on my experience or about Vipassana in general, I'd be happy to do that. And also let me know if you would like to learn about Reiki and my experience as a Reiki healer. How is it that I take a session, and how is it that Reiki energy works? What are its benefits? Stuff like that. And that brings me to the end of this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you very, very soon.